Imagine you're driving a car down the highway. Suddenly, a truck swerves into your lane. Your heart hammers, your hands grip the wheel, your vision tunnels. That is a normal, healthy stress response. Your body dumps adrenaline to help you react. But now, imagine the truck moves away, the danger passes, but your body doesn't get the memo. The shaking doesn't stop. In fact, it gets worse. You start to feel dizzy, confused, maybe even nauseous. You aren't just scared anymore. You feel like your system is collapsing. For most people, a stressful moment is a spike on a graph. For someone with adrenal insufficiency, that same moment can cause the entire system to crash.
We often talk about stress as something purely psychological, something you just need to manage with breathing exercises or a better mindset. But what happens when the machinery responsible for processing stress is actually broken? Today, we are looking at the neuroendocrinology of adrenal insufficiency, or AI. We're basing this conversation on a breakdown from My Adrenal Life regarding stress intolerance, but we're going to layer in the medical realities of how cortisol and the autonomic nervous system actually interact. We're going to answer a question that plagues almost everyone with this diagnosis. Why does a minor annoyance, like a loud noise or a deadline, sometimes feel like a life or death physical emergency? Eloise, this concept of stress intolerance, it sounds like a personality trait, but it's actually a physiological failure, isn't it?
It is entirely physiological, Noah. And that distinction is vital because patients often blame themselves for being weak, when in reality, they are experiencing a mechanical failure. To understand this, we have to look at the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. In a healthy body, this is a sophisticated feedback loop. When you encounter stress, your brain sends a signal down to the adrenal glands, sitting on top of your kidneys. It tells them to release cortisol.
Right, and we usually think of cortisol as the bad guy, the stress hormone we want to lower.
That is a common misconception in the wellness world, but medically, cortisol is life-sustaining. It isn't just a stress hormone, it's a fuel injector and a shock absorber. When that truck swerves at you, your nervous system hits the gas pedal, that's the adrenaline. But cortisol is what provides the fuel, glucose, to sustain that energy. Crucially, cortisol also acts as the brake. It provides negative feedback to the brain to say, okay, we have enough hormone now, calm down. In adrenal insufficiency, whether it's Addison's disease or secondary types, you have the gas pedal, the adrenaline rush, but you have no fuel and no brake.
So the nervous system fires, the heart rate goes up, the pupils dilate, but the chemical that stabilizes that reaction never shows up.
Precisely. The National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases describes cortisol as essential for maintaining blood pressure and cardiovascular function. Without it, when stress hits, your blood vessels can't maintain their tone. Your blood sugar might drop rapidly because cortisol isn't there to release stored glucose. So that anxiety you feel isn't just worry. It's often hypoglycemia and hypotension. It is your body physically running out of resources.
That mirrors the source text we're looking at. It mentions that mismatch. The nervous system is fast, but the hormonal support is absent. I want to dig into how this feels, because the text mentions symptoms like brain fog, shakiness, and sudden fatigue. It sounds incredibly disorienting.
It is disorienting because it defies the logic of cause and effect. If you run a marathon, you expect to be exhausted. But if you have AI, a heated conversation or a loud environment can trigger that same level of depletion. We call this the crash. In a healthy person, cortisol rises to meet the stress demand and then gently lowers you back to baseline. In AI, the demand spikes, the cortisol stays flat or low, and the body compensates by dumping more adrenaline or simply shutting down. That brain fog is often a sign that the brain isn't getting enough oxygen or glucose.
This brings us to a huge point of contention for patients, the confusion with anxiety. The article explicitly states, sometimes it doesn't even feel like anxiety in the traditional sense. It feels physical. Yet I assume many people with this condition are told they are just having a panic attack.
It happens constantly. And to be fair to emergency responders, the symptoms overlap significantly. Tachycardia, trembling, a sense of impending doom, those are textbook panic attack symptoms. But they are also textbook symptoms of an impending adrenal crisis. The difference lies in the mechanism. A panic attack is an intense emotional and nervous system surge. In AI, those symptoms are often caused by the blood pressure bottoming out or sodium levels dropping. If you treat an adrenal crisis as a panic attack by just trying to calm down without administering corticosteroids, the patient can go into shock. The physical danger is real.
So when the article asks, how do I manage fight or flight situations when my body feels like it's already on edge? It's not asking for meditation tips. It's asking how to operate a vehicle that has no shock absorbers.
That is a perfect analogy. Imagine driving a car with no shocks over a pothole. A normal car barely feels it. Your car might lose a wheel. That is the stress intolerance. It's not that the person is emotionally fragile, it's that their physiological buffer is gone. Small stressors hit the raw nerve directly.
We should clarify that adrenal insufficiency isn't just one thing. The text mentions PAI, SAI, and TAI. Do these mechanisms work differently depending on the type?
They do, and the nuance is important for treatment. PAI, or primary adrenal insufficiency, is also known as Addison's disease. This is where the adrenal glands themselves are damaged, usually by an autoimmune attack. In this case, patients often lack both cortisol and aldosterone. Aldosterone balances sodium and potassium. Without it, dehydration and salt cravings are severe, which makes the blood pressure issues even worse.
And secondary and tertiary?
In secondary and tertiary, the adrenals are usually intact, but the signal from the brain is missing. The pituitary or hypothalamus isn't sending the order to make cortisol. This is common in patients who have been on long-term steroids for other conditions, what we call iatrogenic suppression. While they usually retain aldosterone function, their cortisol response is still flat. So the stress intolerance remains a shared experience across all types, even if the salt-wasting aspect differs.
That connects to the freeze response mentioned in the text. It talks about moments where the mind goes blank. We usually associate fight or flight with action, but why does the lack of cortisol cause a freeze?
Think of the freeze response as a system error. The brain screams danger via the sympathetic nervous system. The body tries to mobilize energy to run or fight, but the metabolic fuel, the glucose release triggered by cortisol, isn't there. The engine floods, the brain essentially short circuits to preserve what little energy remains. It's a protective mechanism. You stop processing complex thoughts because you don't have the metabolic currency to pay for them.
That explains the brain fog that people describe as debilitating. It's not just forgetting where your keys are, it's an inability to process input.
Correct. And this leads to what the article calls recovery time. A healthy person might have a stressful meeting, feel wired for 10 minutes, and then settle. For someone with AI, that meeting might require a stress dose of medication, extra hydrocortisone, to mimic what the body should have done naturally. If they don't take it, or if they take it too late, they might be physically depleted for the rest of the day. They have borrowed energy they didn't have, and the debt is expensive.
I want to touch on the caregiver aspect because the text explicitly mentions them. From the outside, this must look incredibly confusing. One minute the person is fine, the next they are snapping at you or collapsing on the sofa because of a noise.
It can look like emotional volatility. If a partner says, "Why are you so upset? It's just a crowded restaurant," they are looking at the situation through a neurotypical lens. For the patient, the noise and crowds are sensory inputs that require cortisol to process. If the tank is empty, that sensory input becomes a physical assault. The patient isn't trying to be difficult. Their nervous system is redlining. Understanding that this is
biological, not behavioral, is the single most helpful thing a caregiver can do.
It reframes the instability as a symptom, not a personality flaw. That seems to be the core message here, separating the biology from the character.
And that is difficult because cortisol affects mood. We know from psychiatric research that cortisol dysregulation is linked to depression and irritability. When your blood sugar crashes, you get hangry, irritable, and anxious. Now multiply that by 10. A person with AI might feel sudden rage or despair when their cortisol is low. It is a chemical state. Recognizing I am not a bad person, I am low on cortisol, allows the patient to treat the medical issue rather than spiraling into shame.
There's a line in the text, stress can feel less buffered than it once did. That really strikes me. It implies a loss of protection. Is it possible to regain that buffer, or is it just about manual management forever?
It is largely about manual management, which is an enormous cognitive load. This is what we call the hidden job of chronic illness. A healthy body manages cortisol automatically, adjusting perfectly for a cold breeze, a virus, or an argument. An AI patient has to be their own pancreas and adrenal gland, essentially. They have to intellectually predict, I have a dentist appointment. That is a level 4 stressor. I need 5 milligrams of hydrocortisone. If they guess wrong, they crash. So you never fully regain the automatic buffer. You have to build a manual one through medication timing and lifestyle adjustments.
That manual management sounds exhausting in itself.
It is. The fatigue isn't just from the disease, it's from the vigilance. You are constantly monitoring your own body for signs of failure.
The article closes with a very strong validation. Reacting strongly to stress when your cortisol signaling is altered is not a character flaw. Why is that message so necessary in the medical community right now?
Because for decades before we understood the nuance of the HPA axis, many of these patients, especially women, were dismissed. They were told it was nerves or hysteria. Even today, because AI is rare, many patients end up in the ER with a crisis and are treated for a panic attack while their organs are shutting down. The validation is a safety mechanism. If a patient trusts their body, if they know that this specific feeling means I need medicine, they can save their own life. If they doubt themselves, if they think, I'm just being dramatic, they might delay treatment until it's too late.
So trusting that fight or flight sensation is actually a survival skill.
Exactly. The body is trying to communicate that the system is offline. Listening to that rather than suppressing it is key.
This really changes how I look at the concept of resilience. We usually think of resilience as toughness. How much can you take? But in this context, resilience is about respecting the mechanical limits of the body. You wouldn't drive a car with a flat tire and call it tough. You'd call it reckless.
That is the perfect way to put it. True resilience for someone with adrenal insufficiency is knowing when to stop. It is knowing that pushing through can land you in the ICU. It's a different kind of strength, the strength to say no, to rest, and to take the medication regardless of what society expects your stamina to look like.
It's a sobering but empowering reality. The text we explored today isn't just describing symptoms. It's describing a different way of existing in the world, a way that requires precision, patience, and a lot of self-forgiveness. If this conversation resonated with you, or if you know someone navigating the complexities of adrenal insufficiency, consider sending this episode their way. It might be the validation they've been looking for.